How are you guys doing today? It's Anthony Gangi. Welcome to another episode of Chair Talk. Guys, great dialogue coming our way from Russ Hamilton. We are going to be discussing, or he's pretty much going to be leading the way, 5 tips for prison cell searches. And not just for prison, but also jails as well. But 5 good tips to help you conduct and be effective for a cell search. Now, guys, before we start the dialogue, I have 3 sponsors. First sponsor is American Military University. If you guys get a chance and you are looking for higher education, check out American Military University. I mean, guys, we should bring some experience back into the classroom. American Military University is very supportive of what we do on Tier Talk, but also supportive of what we do in the corrections profession. And we also have Guardian RFID from inmate tracking and cell checks to cloud-based business and artificial intelligence. Guardian RFID digitally transforms jails, prisons, and juvenile detention facilities of every size. Visit guardianrfid.com for more information. And guys, if you do get a chance, we do post some videos up on Guardian RFID as well. So please check out their content on the YouTube channel. And we also have Shea USA. Shea USA is the world's leading weapon, cell phone, and contraband detection manufacturer for corrections. For more information, contact Joe Vasquez at 440-561-7615. He's a subject matter expert, and he's passionate about our industry, and he will take good care of you. Guys, we just did a show recently with Joe on, and we discussed work in the lobby, and we also discussed metal detectors. They got some pretty unique items for sale. Tell them Tier Talk sent you, and I'm sure they'll take care of you up to 20% for what I'm hearing. And guys, don't forget, I have inmate manipulation is on the market. A link to that is in the description. It's actually called Inmate Manipulation Decoded. And I'm working on my daily reader. First 2 months are in the books. January and February are done. 10 more months left, but we're getting there. It's a lot of work, but we are making it happen. Russ, what's up, man?
Anthony, how's it going?
I had to stumble through that intro for some reason. I don't know what's going on. Hey, Russ, 5 tips for prison cell searches. Before we go into that, do you mind introducing yourself to our audience, please?
Not at all. My name's Russ Hamilton. I am a former and retired sergeant with California Department of Corrections and Rehabilitation, starting my career all the way back in 1989 at San Quentin State Prison. I also have worked as a senior juvenile correctional officer at a local detention facility near me. I now work for a private vendor that we work for a probation department and for a county jail near me, and I do the reentry and rehabilitation part of that program.
Russ has evolved, you know. Hey, I maybe just got an invite maybe for another conference out in New York. I think we're going to probably do the Wisconsin conference. I'm definitely going to be over at Masca in Atlantic City. So we got a lot of events to share our knowledge, and I can't wait to have some more panel discussions. We love doing stuff that's interactive, and I'm sure whether we can get Russ on site or Russ could always be zoomed in. Correct, Russ?
Absolutely, man. I am available 24/7, 365.
It's worth the day off, right, Russ?
I don't take days off.
Well, no, I'm saying days off from the other jobs so you can come speak at the conference.
Yes. I'm always willing, always willing.
Yes. Okay, so Russ, before we break down the 5 tips, 5 tips for prison cell searches. Why is this topic so important?
Okay, so first off, when a lot of people start in this business, you have to start somewhere. And the typical random cell search is your least common denominator. Let me tell you something. A random cell search is going to be your least productive, most boring kind of search. And I know a lot of people cringe when I say things like that, but it's not a targeted search. And it doesn't have anything going for it, really, in that you're not really identifying where potential contraband already is. This is an exclusionary search. This is a way that we make sure that one particular cell is actually devoid of contraband. And it's a slow, time-consuming process. And there are better ways to become a contraband hound, but this is the starting position right here. This is getting down in the blocks and getting ready to learn about what you're doing.
By the way, guys, we do have 5 tips, but if you stay to the end, I have a bonus tip I'm going to add, a Ganji bonus tip, because these first 5 are Russ's. All right, so Russ, let's go to tip number 1. Always start at the door. What does that mean, Russ? I'm so confused.
Okay, well, this is my own personal thing, because whenever I would do a cell search, you always have to have a place to start. But your most vulnerable area where an inmate could potentially run up and grab something and hurt you, or run away with it and throw it in a trash can, try and get away, is going to be at that door, because it's going to be that much harder for them to get there. You should already make sure that area is secure. But let me tell you, I've seen this bad thing happen. The other thing too is door is a prime area to start. So if you have some people that try and distract you, set up a diversion or something like that, if you start with the door first, you may already find the most significant contraband that there is, because especially if it's weapons and things like that, they like to have them at the door, so when the door cracks, they can go out and be ready. And there's magnificent places to search there too. The underneath of the door, the top. If it's the sliding type of door, you can check those rails, and you want to be able to get up in there and check that, and that's going to be your basis to start. Once you know that area is clean, you are ready to proceed on from there.
Hey, Russ, do you think the doors or stuff right when you enter the cell is usually ignored?
Yeah, it can be, because people, they start and they go to the back of the cell, and then by the time they get around to the door, they're kind of tired a little bit. It just depends on what you've established as your routine for that type of a search. For me, I always wanted to start with the door, mainly because it seemed like that's where the good stuff always was. But you never know for sure.
I think that's a great tip, guys. Something I'm learning new. I'm learning something new every day. All right, tip number 2: be inquisitive and never take how something looks at face value. What does that mean, Russ?
Okay, so this is where we don't want to make assumptions about what we're looking at. We're looking at, at the back of the cell, and we see the wall there. Are we going to assume that that's a wall? Well, the natural tendency of our, human perception is to, yeah, that looks good. It's got paint on it. There's nothing there to see. But, so many times in my career, I've gone just a little bit further, gone over it, maybe scraped a little bit of paint away, and found things actually lodged in there. You found dope. I found weapons where they chiseled out a little piece, and then they plaster back over it with a little bit of like toothpaste or something like that. And then, these guys, they're inventive. They'll go, they'll be out there in, vocations or someplace like that, and they come across a little paint. They sneak it back to the cell, throw some paint on it, and that little piece is in there forever. They don't have to access that. It's not like dope. So they can have a weapon there. I've seen false bottoms. We had one time where we had inmates that were painting walkers that were being sent down from these dorms that we had. And these inmates installed, false backs in all of the lockers. Took us forever to root that out, but it was really easy for them to, make a space just big enough for a shank or a little bit of dope. And it was indiscernible. And if you don't, start measuring things and checking and seeing if there's false backs, false bottoms, you can miss those things. One of the best ones I ever saw, and I wish that this had been mine, actually, was one of our officers looking at some mouse droppings. And those mouse droppings weren't real mouse droppings. They weren't droppings at all. It was black tar heroin. So always, always be curious and never assume that what you're seeing is what you're seeing.
Yeah, guys, and I think Russ definitely covered that, because inmates can order items and then do what they can to, like, I know for powder's big, where they'll do what they can and put stuff into the powder. So yeah, maybe it's nothing at first, but having said that, when you check a little further into the powder, that's where they hide a lot of their stuff. So having said that, you have to make sure if stuff has come off like the top. If you could take it off, dig through a little bit. Again, we have to really be thorough. And if we don't, trust and believe the inmates know exactly where to hide it, based on where we're not looking. And sad to say, in some states, inmates are allowed to observe the officer doing the search, which to me I don't get, because it really messes to me with safety and security, because it's going to go right into Russ's next tip, which is select a pattern and stick to it. And when you allow inmates to see the officer's pattern, to see what it is that they're looking at, that can kind of tell the inmate, okay, well, I could put things here, and I know they're not going to check it. So again, that's the thing that I still have an issue with. But hey, Russ, tip number 3, select a pattern and stick to it.
So this is one of those, it's kind of an individual preference, but different people have different ideas about why they do what they do. For me, what I would do is I would pick a spiral pattern, and I would go around the exterior of the cell. I would check all of those walls. I would check, top to bottom, and anywhere within the first, 2 to 3 feet. And I would just keep on that pattern, all the way around. And then anything that I found along the way that wasn't maybe necessarily contraband, but was something I needed to investigate further, I would try and move it more toward the center. So I would be able to end up at that center section at the last, using, hopefully the mattress, which I've already taken down and, bent it both ways and checked it with a metal detector and done some of those things, and then piled those things up that I needed to really look at more thoroughly. Sometimes you can do that. It can be a little bit hard depending on how exactly it is. I knew guys that would use more like grid patterns, and it was, a back and forth. But me, I liked that, that outward spiral coming back toward the middle, and place anything I needed to deal with at the very end in that middle, if possible.
What do you feel about people that break the room up into quadrants?
Yeah, that's basically like the grid that I mentioned. But for me, that didn't work as well, because I always wanted to start on that exterior wall, because that wall was, where I would find, a lot of places where things would be butted up against each other, a lot of chances to hide contraband in those spots. And so for me, that was always, the best part of the search usually was there, because you were more likely to find it. Trying to search quadrants, you still have to overlap, and it can get confusing if you suddenly start to overlap in one spot and you find something interesting, but it doesn't pan out, and then you got to go back and remember. For me, it was just easier to do that spiral, always coming back toward the center, because it was just better for me to remember where I had left off exactly. So, different strokes for different folks. But for me, I found that the best way, at least for me.
And as you do the spiral, you going top down or down up, or?
I do everything all the way top down and overlapping until I come there. Some things, of course, like the ceiling, you do want to examine that. If possible, if it's got paint on it, it may be harder to do. But it's just a matter of, trying to make sure that there's no little spot left unturned and undone. So for me, it was exterior all the way around, top to bottom, and then finishing up spiraling into the dead center of the room.
All right. And hey, Russ, when you mentioned paint, and you're mentioning, maybe checking out a vent if need be. Some cells do have vents, obviously. Do you look for anything to tell it's been tampered with, like paint, or maybe the screw on the vent is kind of what do you call it, scraped, or?
Yeah, there can be scrapes and stuff, but part of the problem is that you accumulate a lot of just wear and tear, and at some point somebody used that vent to hide something, no doubt. Whether it's being used on that particular day is anyone's guess. I would look at those things, and I would try and break them loose, wiggle them. I would usually check out tools if I thought it was worth the effort to break something loose and see how that was going. I had some strings with like some magnets and stuff that I could fish back into some places and pull shanks out potentially. It just all depends on what you have to be able to access those spots. Sometimes what I would do too is I would scuff things up a little bit, and then just a little bit of dust and stuff, and then come back later and see if someone had tried to unscrew that screw and move it, and maybe it would be in a slightly different position than from when I would write it down last. And so I would carry my my notebook with me with just some quick things about the way fixtures looked, the way certain screws were set, the way certain ductwork was looking. But it was hard too, because you would have other officers come behind and check some of those same things as you. But sometimes it would give you a little inkling and really something to kind of look at and go by.
Yeah, it could be someone that maybe later on, maybe at first it's just a routine, cell search, which we do every day. But then maybe later on, if there's reason to believe they're hiding something, that's a great way for the next one to be targeted now. Like, okay, we're going to target this person because I believe they have something. I couldn't catch it the first time, but you never know, because I'll tell you something right now. Russ knows this. After you go to a cell search and you do it, these inmates wind up within a few minutes going back to where those items, that if they have anything hidden, going to make sure those items are there, which I've seen happen right away. I've seen usually in dorms, in my experience, I've seen us doing searches where we may not originally come up with anything, but then all of a sudden, within a few minutes when the searches are done, some of the inmates actually go back to where the areas where we should have checked. And then it's like, oh, wait a second here. Let's go back and do another search, because it looks like they're all checking out this one area here, and maybe there's something there. So, and also the tools. You mentioned a mirror. You mentioned tools that are effective for searching.
Yeah, well, sometimes I was able to check out from our control room. We would have, some wrenches and screwdrivers and that kind of thing. My own personal tools that I kept on me all the time was I kept a big, it was like about a 5x6 flexible mirror. I would have that mounted on like a mechanic's mirror, because those ones are too little to see anything. So I would mount it on there with a binder clip, and then I could change the angle. You got to have a really powerful flashlight, because you want to be able to bounce it off that mirror and see anything, any little strings, anything like that that's there, because you want to make sure that you're not missing anything. So it's imperative that your light is really super bright. And then I would also have some magnets on some strings that I could fish down into spots, and one of those little mechanical grabbers I could reach down in. I don't know how many times I pulled little balloons of baggies of dope out of, little cracks and seals in the windows and stuff. So, it just kind of all depends on, how good you want to be at it. But with me, I always carried this stuff because I was always finding stuff, 24 hours a day, all the time, just all the time pulling stuff out.
Well, this does come from experience. And I know, Russ, you were very big on body language too. Like the one thing I mentioned about people going back to those areas, I'm sure there's signs that help you decide where you want to go when it comes to body language too with the inmates, correct? Like where they're looking, where they're not looking, stuff like that.
Yeah, where they're looking. Yeah, where they're looking, where they're not looking. I always was big on changes in pitch or tenor of the volume of what was going on when I would walk into a room. That's always a good one. Whether if it suddenly gets silent or it suddenly gets too boisterous, you're looking at opposite ends of the spectrum. That whole deer in the headlights look, or some guy suddenly walking away. A guy suddenly walking away usually means, for instance, that they don't want to be in a certain area because there's something there. And I can't tell you the number of times I've seen guys walk away from an area and gone there and found dope or cell phones or even a shank, things like that. So you just have to be hip on reading the body language and making it count, for what you can get out of it.
Yes, that brings us to tip number 4. If you find significant contraband, do not stop searching. That's a good one, Russ. What does that mean?
Yeah. Well, a lot of times, people, they go into a cell or an area, and, they're tired. Maybe they've done a lot of searching in the day, and then suddenly they come across something, and maybe it's something pretty good. Maybe it's a tattoo gun, maybe it's a shank or something like that. And you're kind of toward the end of your search, and then all of a sudden you're like, well, that's good for today. Man, when you find that thing, keep on searching, because something is almost always right in that next area. I rarely found things by themselves, but I would often find things, in 2s or 3s. And I'll never forget one time, me and Officer French, we were searching around in this area, and I was looking up in this vent, and I could just like see this slight thing that looked like a line. And so I got up there and got looking at it better. And sure enough, it was a little string, and I was able to reach up in there and, coax it out and pulled it out. And it was a nice, great big ball of dope. And cool. And it was amazing because I was just telling this guy, I said, now that we've got this, we need to keep searching. And I looked down and I pulled this towel back on this bucket that was underneath the sink, and there was 5 gallons of Pruno in there, inmate manufactured alcohol. And so it was a great lesson for the young guy to go, wow, yes, when you find something, don't stop, keep on going. Same things to be said if you're doing a pat down search on someone and you find a little something, don't stop there. Keep on going. They have something somewhere else. If they have a little dope in their pocket, they probably also have some down in their shoe. So don't assume that just because you've got what you were after or what you were looking for, or there was a big surprise, follow it on out. Keep that thoroughness up and don't end the search prematurely.
Yeah, guys, sometimes people look at the search as it's outcome driven when it's really the effort. So you'll have people that they don't really want to do the search anyway. They're lazy. I mean, we do have some staff, unfortunately, that's just not 100% committed to doing the searches. So what they do is they kind of go through the motions. And when they find something, however small, for them, the search is done. I did it. It's done. Look what I found. And they don't realize that sometimes those things that are put there is meant for you to find to take your mind off of the bigger things. And as I said, like what Russ said, I think that occurs when you get an officer or staff member who just is not committed to doing the search. And then once they find something small, they use that to justify that they've done their search, because I've seen it. I've worked with people where, you got some officers that are go-getters and they're chasing after it. And then you got some that are kind of just, going through the motions because it's rather routine for them. And then the moment they find something small, they, use that as a way to I found my stuff and this is what I got. And it's like, wow. I said, I remember dealing with that. It's like, wow, that's all you found? Yes. It's like, yeah, but you know what? For me, it's kind of like what Russ said. Maybe those were meant to be found because they knew that most of us, or not most of us, but they knew maybe today you were looking at that area and they knew that you would stop the moment you found something instead of, motivating to keep going. Am I correct with that, Russ? Have you ever seen that?
Yeah. It's that thing. It's just like, okay, we're done here. It was a great search, man. We rooted out something. Maybe it was just porn or something like that.
Contraband.
Yeah, nuisance contraband. For me, I always liked pulling off what I called a hat trick, and I had a lot of them in my career. And that's where I would get 3 separate serious pieces of contraband. Many times it was 3 weapons, or it could be 3 cell phones, or 2 weapons and a cell phone, or a baggie of dope and a cell phone and a shank, whatever it was. And so I was always driven, man. If I didn't get my hat trick in a night, I mean, I was a sad sack after that. I was like, man, I should have been going harder. I should have found a way to get my hat trick every night. And so that's the way I looked at it, and I never wanted to stop. And then when I got to my hat trick, I would say, you know what? How about one more? And that's why, the very last day of my career, I found a shank. So
yeah, you gotta push that effort. Tip number 5, always process your evidence in accordance with policy and procedure. What do you got there, Russ?
Okay. So, some people, they just look at finding this stuff as a nuisance. And so what they do is they end up throwing it away, or they just don't complete the report. Maybe they throw it in the hot trash instead of the evidence room. Anytime you find an actual something that's a felony, which usually is dope or a shank, you have to process it. Also, if you find a cell phone, even though that in and of itself may not be a felony, it might have felonies recorded on it. There could be something on the camera. There could be something in a message or a text about a hit or anything else. So don't slack on that kind of thing, because you never know exactly what you might have stumbled across. Just to give you an example, I had one time found the head of an X-Acto knife buried in the plastic of a razor. And then burned into that plastic on there was, of all things, a patent, not latent, but patent fingerprint, right? And so that's a direct felony. It's easy to overlook that when it's found in a common area and just go, oh, this is worthless. It's not traceable back to someone. Well, yeah, it is in this case. Also, when you're processing weapons, you want to be able to define where those weapons came from. Where was the material that they used for the weapon? Maybe, which gates did they get it past? I had one incident where I found it was essentially a gutter nail that was, it was huge. It was long, and it had a bulbous tip on the end, and we couldn't figure out where it came from. And it turned out that we found out later that there had been a job on the other side on our medium yard where they had used this to hang a bunch of insulation. And somehow, some way, over the years, those had either worked loose or they had set some aside, and they managed to get them back in on the other side. So being able to determine that, we were able to actually find more shanks like that turned up in some other areas on that other side. So don't ever minimize what it is that you're doing, because you might just find out that, hey, that shank that you recovered that you couldn't see any blood on actually had some microscopic blood on it, and it had been used maybe the week before, and they never knew this guy had been hit. And now you don't have the shank anymore. That's part of the evidence. Now you don't have it because you threw it away, or you threw it in the hot trash. So always take the time, because those things are important, especially with regard when we're talking about intelligence, because intelligence can crack things that you may not be aware of at the time that you're actually dealing with it.
Yeah, and guys, when you seize contraband, you want to limit the hands it goes through as well. It should get from the person who found it to the investigative authority, probably with just the original set of hands that found the contraband. We have what they call continuity of evidence. That has to be part of the record keeping for when you find contraband. So what I usually tell people, if I was let's say a unit officer and I found some contraband, the general assignment officer would relieve the unit officer, so the unit officer could log everything in and then put it right into evidence. But in some cases, some facilities had it where the general assignment officer would then pick it up, let's say, from the unit officer in my scenario, which now you have too many hands involved. Have the general assignment officer relieve the person who found it and let that person go down and put it in the evidence box. Because, again, one of the biggest things when it comes to contraband finding is continuity of evidence. If by any chance there's too many hands, it already becomes questionable. But second thing is, if there's hands on it that's not noted, it can get thrown out 100%. So, and you agree with that, Russ, right? Continuity of evidence with any type of contraband?
Yeah, in ours, we always had the person who found it be the one to process it in. The other thing that you should take into account is if you have to move something in order to take a photograph of it, still take a photograph of it as close as you can to where it came from, and draw your diagram out. I think one of the best photos that we ever did is we actually had placed an inmate into handcuffs, and fortunately he didn't fight us, but we ended up finding, my buddy ended up finding a weapon in his waistband, and someone had a camera right on him then, and so we were able to actually hold him in place and take that picture without removing the weapon in the waistband. And I don't know, that might have been kind of a little bit of iffy, but at the time it was one of the few times we ever took a picture of a weapon on somebody. And so, actually doing that, just bolsters that. Other things to think about is, when you're crafting the way the pictures turn out, start out away from the area, take a picture then of, outside the cell, then, with the cell door, the cell number, and then a picture from the inside, and get closer and closer to where that weapon is. And then always have something that identifies the incident number, and always have something that gives you what the scale of that weapon is before you actually pick it up and process it, if it's possible. It's not always possible. Sometimes, and I'll never forget, we had, it was fourth tier Carson section in San Quentin. And there were so many weapons on the tier that we just had to start stuffing them, inside of our shirts because it was too dangerous to leave them out there. And then, trying to, get guys in there to do cuffing operations, it was just really chancy. So sometimes you can't always preserve that evidence in situ, but you can go back later and say, the approximate place I removed this weapon from was, and that just has to be good enough. And then you have to explain why you moved it at the time, and it was for staff safety.
Yeah, I think that's great advice. And guys, again, this is something that we really have to make sure we pay attention to, because sometimes we got this great contraband and we have the inmate dead to rights, but we mess up somewhere in the due process of it all. And then it gets thrown out. And then we always wonder, like, what happened? How could administration just throw it out? Or how could the investigative division not want it? And when you really look into it, you realize there could have been something with the continuity of evidence or some way where the inmate was left with a little bit of a loophole in regards to the due process. So basically, you just want to do whatever you can to cross your T's and dot your I's on that. Now for the bonus tip. If you stayed this long, the bonus tip is going to be, don't get discouraged. Treat every cell search with 100% effort. I'm going to be honest with you guys. I wasn't always as effective as Russ Hamilton. My percentage was maybe about 25, 30%. It doesn't mean that I didn't commit to effort. It's just most of the time we don't find anything. And the problem is we start to get discouraged, and then we start to kind of, drag ass a little bit. It's like, here we go again. Let's go through the routine. And you wind up not being 100% effective because you're going in already defeated. So the best advice for me to give to you at this point is treat every search as if it has the potential to have something great. Because if you don't, and you walk in with the mindset that you're not going to find nothing, that's the effort you're going to put in. So you always have to put in the effort as if I am going to find something, and let me do what I got to do to make sure I can. And if you don't, it's okay. It's not about the outcome. It's about the effort that you put into it. Russ, what's your thoughts on that bonus tip?
Yeah, those exclusionary searches are important, and you have to do them. But that's kind of though too that least common denominator type of thing, because for me, I mean, everyone's different, right? But for me, it was just like I would get my 2 or 3 or whatever it was for the day out of the way, and yes, I would do them 100%. But then I was ready to really start finding contraband, because they would write the post orders as in this way where they were more interested in searching than finding. But that's my own personal philosophy. That's what I took away from it over the years, with a record that I'd put up against anybody, anytime, with regards to the number of finds that I made. I found that that they were actually trying to just take staff who weren't interested in the process, who weren't interested in actually producing, and give them a task to do that, made that one little chunk of the facility safe for that minute of the day. But like I say, that's my own personal take on it.
I think that's actually going to be my topic for March 1st when I start my next month now on my daily reader. It's treat every search with 100% effort, because I know people do get discouraged because they have the wrong mindset going in. Hey, I thought this was a great dialogue, Russ. I mean, we really covered a lot. Anything you'd like to say in closing, Russ, Keepers of Chaos founder?
Just this, guys. This is a great profession. We enjoy it a lot. Everything that you can do to help us are things like, sharing this, subscribing to Tier Talk, coming on over and being part of Keepers of Chaos, or any other, social media platform that you're interested in. There's a lot to learn. There's a lot to do. Just stay professional and stay safe, everyone.
Yes. And guys, sorry about that. As I was doing it, I'm getting a message on YouTube as well, so I'm trying to answer back to the comments. Hey, guys, I mean, again, we did this video in an effort to, hopefully provide some level of safety back at your facility, so please take the advice that we give you. The key is, I mean, it's not so much about us giving advice, but rather how you apply the advice that's given. This is very tactical advice, and I think this is the advice that actually is something that what makes this channel good, what makes this channel unique. We're making an effort here to save a life. the advice given here could save a life depending on what it is that you find. So, as always, guys, the show is Tier Talk. If you haven't, please subscribe, interact, engage, comment, hit that bell. Bell's going to notify you every time I post up a video. Stay safe.